All right, everybody, we're on YouTube Live, and we have Bryan Williams with us, and we have David Mahula and Bill Forster, sorry. So tonight we have Bryan Williams. He calls himself the Unicorn Chief. I call him the Anti-Shitty Chief. And we're going to start a club, make T-shirts, all that happy stuff. But the primary, I'm super excited about having Bryan on with us because I believe he brings a very unique perspective to a lot of the problems that we talk about in implementing change within law enforcement training. One of the things that we talk about a lot is having to run into admin. And Bryan has been on both sides. Actually, he's been on three sides of the issue as a former street cop, firearms instructor, SWAT guy. Then he moved up through admin. So he saw change and saw mistakes that people who want to make change were doing, but also from outside law enforcement as a city manager. So we're super grateful to have Bryan on with us tonight. And before I go too deep, Bryan, would you like to give us a little bit of your background and provide some insight as to what brought you here today?
Sure. So just a couple of clarifications on the background. So I've worked for two municipal police departments, two cities, um, North Texas up in the Dallas area, and then here in Central Texas, north of Austin. So starting out, just real quick, going through that, I've worked just about every division in an agency, mostly on patrol. CID, worked undercover narcotics. Was on SWAT for about 18 years before I left Texas in 2004. Was hired as the police chief for the agency. Served in that role for about 8 years and got asked to come up as an assistant city manager, not city manager. I'm not real
Oh,
sure I'm cut out for that job, but served in that assistant city manager role for gosh almost 11 years. I retired in January of 2024 after about 38 years in local government. Set out for a year trying to figure things out, and I had an opportunity to go to work for one of the newly elected sheriffs here in Central Texas. So I've been doing that for about a year. So in terms of the training background, I have been involved, my entire career. Instructing firearms instruction mostly. That's the area that my passion has always been in, and it continues to this day in that area. So there was a point where I got pretty heavy into competitive shooting in USPSA back at in North Texas. Ended up making Grandmaster in limited division up there. And at that time, very different than today, where we see a lot of police officers involved in the sport. At that time, there weren't many at all. I think I was probably the fifth or sixth active duty cop in the U.S. to make GM. Definitely the first one in Texas. Um, 2004, I came here as the chief. We got involved in competitive shooting again because I had some guys that wanted to get into that, and it was a good opportunity for me to kind of get back in that game. After about 5 years, 6 years or so, about 5 years, I made Grandmaster again in production division. Both of those are iron sight divisions, so weren't really, other than open division, we weren't really running RDSs on guns. So but I did that a second time. I'm still active. I shoot every week. I shoot all the time. I think I did maybe 21,000 rounds in training this last year. I teach occasionally with TTPOA, do some classes, try to teach at the conference, and am on the training advisory board with TTPOA. So that's kind of a quick picture of the background. If anything sticks out, you want to dig deeper, we can do that.
yeah, absolutely. And that's this wide variety of background that you have, I think would be super beneficial for a lot of the guys. I mean, you've been on both sides of the fence. You know, there's an us them mentality, as you know, between the street guys and the non-cons and admin. But people are always saying admin this, admin that. They're screwing everything up. They're not allowing things to go the way we want them to. They keep blocking our attempts to change. And you've been on both sides of that, having been an instructor before you made admin and then being an admin. And while I totally, having watched your first Iron Sights podcast and looking forward to the next one coming out, you're definitely not the admin that a lot of people have. And a lot of what you said resonated with me because I had a sheriff that was much the same way. It was my second sheriff. The first sheriff I worked under was a guy who brought monumental change to my agency. We went from, in 1998, most people were still carrying 357 Magnum wheel guns, and he
Yeah.
went to 6 hour P229s, if that's any indicator of how much change this guy brought. So when he retired and my new sheriff came in, he kept going with that. How do we keep improving? How do we keep improving performance and all that? So I think you and my former sheriff have a lot in common, but you also have worked with the admin that most people don't like and don't want, and you've had to work through those people. And then when you got into admin, how did what kind of advice, what kind of things did you see that guys wanting to make change, what were they running into, and how could they overcome those blockers? I think is the ultimate thing that we're looking for tonight.
I get the gist of that question, everybody's experience is going to be different. As it pertains to the training aspect, honestly, with your admin, it really depends on what the priority is. If it's a priority to them, they're going to be more open to new ideas from a training perspective. If it's not a priority for them, you're really kind of stuck in the mud a little bit. But I think you had a guest on. I can't remember who it was, and he talked a little bit about how he thought it seemed easier to change the culture on some level from the outside versus the inside. And a lot of times when somebody from the outside comes in, has credibility, very skilled, they can tend to help make the case, whereas inside folks just can't get it done. But all of this stuff really is based on, I mean, whether you're getting along with your admin or not, it's still a relationship game, right? I mean, you still have to have relationships with people up and down the chain to get stuff done. And I don't know. A lot of it has to do with how an idea is presented and really understanding who the audience that you're presenting to. That's something that's very important. And I know, typically when guys put together a proposal of whatever, they're probably gonna attack the budget aspect of doing this training or this new thing. They're going to try to address the liability concerns before they get brought up, because as everybody knows, everybody in admin loves to throw out the liability bug. I typically tend to believe that that's a lot of bullshit in many, many cases. Um, in my experience, it's just a roadblock to, hey, we're really not interested in doing this, and there's this whole liability thing that we have to be concerned with. And so, typically I don't really buy that argument. And I'm not really sure if I'm even hitting close to really what you're after, Rick. But you have to know whether training is a priority to your admin, to your chief. And if it's not, and you can tell that it's not, just based on the behaviors and the actions and the outcomes inside the organization, you're going to know that you're going to be stuck in the mud on anything new or any drastic changes on that. Um, how's that? Did I get close to the mark, or am I
Yeah,
still?
we're talking a lot of generalities right now, and
Yeah, right.
I believe that you were referencing Scott Savage. I think Scott Savage was talking about he's found it easier to influence agencies from outside than within. I
Yeah,
ran into that a lot. Even though
right.
my sheriff was pro training, there were a lot of people between me and the sheriff. And I chose to stay slick sleeve. I didn't want brass. I didn't want stripes. I loved working road, just working with people in the city. And when I decided to go full time and start running my flag up for admin or promotion, that's when I was injured and eventually medically retired. So
Right.
I never really got the podium that I was looking for. But I had a friend of mine once. I was talking to him, and this guy was the world's foremost authority on bloodhound tracking training. And he and I were talking one time, and he told me something that's always resonated. And I think every instructor would feel like this. I think that it's something that you said is that no prophet has glory in his own land. And people don't want, people look at you as like you're just Rick, the goofy, aspy guy, nerd who understands things that nobody else understands. So, but you're also kind of a fighty guy. So they didn't want to really hear changes, but I was able to make incremental change just
Right.
within my just within my unit. I found ways of working around it. I found ways of pushing things through the academy, found ways of doing training to benefit people without having to go to admin. Because I think we all have that similar experience, is
Sure.
that we need to do that, but how do we do it? It's like any cop who's not capable of adapting and being creative to get what they want probably is not a very good cop. The if you can't talk somebody into what you want, they're either too far gone for a reason or you're just not communicating very well.
Yeah.
So
And I think you hit on that a little bit. And going back to a question that I know you guys have discussed in different um, formats. Bill, I want to say maybe this came up in your podcast with Scott, just in terms of the practical shooting approach in law enforcement. How do we get that change going? Um, the interesting thing is that there's so many good dudes out there right now that are shooting at a high level, that are out there teaching, that are in their departments, and and I think that they're making those changes, and it could be incremental. It could be incremental. You're going to influence small numbers of people to take that journey, and that's been my experience. I haven't seen broad sweeping change even with my background. I had to look for the rock stars to help them develop to become that person inside the agency, and really just try to remove the obstacles for them so that they can grow and do good things. And I was, I can say that I've been able to do that in both the agencies that I worked for previously. Um, and I think that's where it starts. I think from an instructor standpoint, we have to make, personally, we have to make sure that we've got the right people on the bus in the right spots when it comes to that. And I think internally with trainers, we probably need to do some really good due diligence in terms of who we're putting in those positions, especially if we're talking about stuff that falls into the hard skills area. Like if you're going to put somebody over, they need to be getting after it and showing improvement, continuous improvement. It's not just a, hey, I'm going to go to this dumb firearms instructor school for a week and get my certificate. Now all of a sudden I'm good to go. That's not how it works. That's, at the best you may be in a position to be a safety officer on the line for a while, but you're going to have to apprentice under somebody that knows what the hell they're doing. So anyway, that's kind of a rant, but
no, absolutely, man. You hit on a number of things that we talk about frequently. I think David had something to ask.
No, that was kind of the biggest thing. Going back to what you were saying, that making the small differences where you can, because that's one of the biggest problems I ran into trying to get changes through the department. Big agency, 2,500 officers. It doesn't.
right.
It's hard to scale that especially without the support of the higher ups that prioritize the training the way they should, right?
Right.
Or even making sure they have the correct instructors in the spaces to influence those things.
Right.
And that's, again, it's still going on there. It's one of the hardest things the guys that are still currently there that are having trouble doing. But yeah, going back to that is making those small changes where we could. The biggest impact that I had was probably with the new cadets, seeing them grasp those concepts, and a larger percentage of those guys, the newer generation, have adopted and ran with the practical shooting side of the house.
Right.
Guys that are, that I trained like 2 or 3 years ago, already working their way into A and master class shooting,
Right.
which has been phenomenal. But then my focus has shifted to within Texas and within T2POA is now influencing the instructors, and it's not that check in the box TCOL course, instructor
Right.
course. Now it's, hey guys, this is what shooting is. This is maybe you should start looking outside the box there as well. And that's funny in its own sense, because just like within the department, I'm able to maybe get like 5% of those same guys to bite off on those same concepts, right?
Right.
So just like the outcome I was seeing with the department, that's the same outcome I see with teaching the instructor side of the house. There's about that 5% that takes it and completely runs with it.
Yep.
A couple of them will make, small changes here and there where they can, or, get a better understanding. But like most cops, they get lazy with it and they don't want to go any farther, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's been my experience for 38 years doing this stuff. Exactly the same. So, the needle moves slow, if you will. And there's some dudes that are doing some really cool things out there. I mean, the person that comes to mind is Chancey Pogue up in Fort Worth. And
Yes.
he's doing some incredible stuff. And in fact, he invited me to come up and look at his range. I want to go do that at some point. But
It's a nice facility up there they got.
yeah. So there's dudes out there. I mean, all over the country. And look, the match stuff, the USPSA matches, ID, like whatever match you go do. I mean, it's a pressure test. It's a test bed. Got some guys are going to get really into it, and some guys are going to show up and get throated and not want to come back. Other guys everybody's going to get throated, but a lot of them are going to go, hey, I don't like that, and I don't like getting outshot by this dude that's a dentist, and so I need to go fix it, right? And so it's a place to be tested, to get measured, to take that data and then go back. Man, I reposted a video today that Matt Pronka did, where he was talking about the work in isolation. And Matt is somebody that really talks a lot about that, but he's absolutely right. This is something that I plug in and have plugged into every class that I've done for the last many, many years, is on the back end of that class, throughout the class, but on the back end, I really talk about that work in isolation, the dry fire, and why to try to encourage people to do that. Even going back as far as 30 years, when I would do the basic academy class in firearms, and I would tell them on that Friday, the last day, that unless you do these things on your own, you will never be better than you are today. This last day on the range at the academy is going to be the very best you are as a shooter, unless you take the initiative on your own to do that work. Now, it's been my experience over, some 38, 39 years now, that I still I still see people going to classes and hearing this message, and I don't see the results of the work that they should be doing in isolation. And so to me, when we're talking about this area, how do you inspire and motivate people to do that work when nobody's watching? Because you can come back 6 months or a year later, and I can tell exactly how much work you did or didn't do in that area, and it's a whether they do that work in isolation. You can tell by how they handle the gun. I mean, it's really easy. So.
How would you, how do you motivate people when you were a chief, or even before? How did you motivate people to seek training? You've heard some people talk about if people go to certain amounts of training that or they meet certain higher standards, that they're given extra days off, or they're given comp time, or there's other rewards throughout the year. How do you incentivize people to go get training? Because it's not enough to just say, don't you want to be better? Because we've got crap ton of people out there who are just
Yeah.
happy pulling in a check and praying that they're never tested.
Sure,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
what kind of stuff would you recommend for incentivizing pursuing those standards and training in isolation?
Yeah, well, just other than encourage people and to talk about how that training aligns with a higher level of performance. I'm not real big on giving out cupcakes and cookies to encourage somebody to go to training. They either have it or they don't. But I think too. I mean, we see a lot of people in this profession that are just they're just certificate shopping. They're going to a class to get a cert to do this. It goes on the resume. As an instructor and as even as a chief, one of the things that I've thought a lot about is that how are we capturing all this stuff back into the organization, and how's it the fact that I sent you to a $1,500 school for a week or 2 weeks, what benefit is the organization getting out of this new acquired knowledge that you have that can be beneficial to the team? And I don't think we do a good job of that. I certainly never found a way to cross that bridge, if you will. But I think that's an interesting discussion. If not, we're just paying for people to go get career development training that's only going to benefit them. But how does that benefit the organization, especially if it's something that they can bring back that could really help us? Anyway, got off on another tangent on that one. I'm sorry.
No, that's we don't script these. The tangents actually create more questions, so it's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine.
Bryan, going off of what you had said in the beginning, you had said something around along the lines of, if it's not important to the administration, that they're not going to, want to send people or provide it. From your perspective on the inside, what is important to them? Because I know from the outside, being a guy, on the road and stuff before, I think that's, beneficial for the agency. At least my perspective is, hey, better trained guys are going to be better for the department. But obviously there's a disconnect at some level. And if it's not important to them, why is that? And what is important to them?
Yeah, well, I would be generalizing a lot there, because everybody's going to be different. Everybody has different motivations. From my perspective, I came from a training background, from a perform. Even though my silo was really, was a firearm silo, I stayed in that because I wanted to master it. But it was important to me because it's been important my entire life. So, for me to assume that role, of course, it's going to be important. And it was during my entirety in that role. Other than that, it's hard for me to speak. I mean, to what other people's priorities would be. But I think one of the things to look at, not every agency does this, but I've always been really big on strategic planning. Having what our strategic goals are for the next 3 to 5 years, Training was always a huge segment of that. And to the point that it's important enough that it belongs in a strategic plan that the department is working on this year, next year, and the year after that. I mean, where I was the chief at, we had an opportunity to buy a piece of property to put a new headquarters on it, and it was sitting on 73 or 74 acres. I was able to sell the vision to the city council on the front end of that to get this property so that in the future we would have a place to build a training facility. That was the discussion, and it worked. The property was purchased. The new headquarters went on that property. It was a refurb, but it worked out. It worked out pretty well. And I'd already left the chief's job and moved up to City Hall before there were ever any bond monies to build that training facility. But today there's a beautiful training facility sitting right on that thing that we talked about to the city council many years ago. So you have to have vision for those kinds of things, and certainly if your agency isn't talking about and doing those kinds of things, then I would argue that it's all check the box stuff, right? I mean, there's stuff you have to do in training, the compliance stuff. And then there's a lot of career development and soft skills stuff that happens. And then we get up to the hard skills, and they're hard for a reason, right? And in that area, I would argue that you absolutely need subject matter experts, people that are really good at that skill to be in those roles. The fact of the matter is that there's not many agencies that have those. So when you see a lot of these guys across the country that are, master class and GM level active duty cops that are really pushing the practical shooting approach, using hit factors, doing that kind of stuff to get out of the mentality of, slow down and get your hits. And, you've got 20 seconds to fire 5 rounds at the 25-yard line. All those things are a joke, and they don't do anything to move the profession forward. But I think having discussions, like this with people from different levels and different perspectives and background, kind of helps move the dialogue forward. I don't think in the world of chiefs you're ever going to move the needle when it comes to this stuff. Honestly, I'll be honest with you, because we've seen at least in the last decade a movement away from even talking about those skills. We don't even really talk about them except in that circle, that subject matter expert or the troop level discussion. And for me, from my perspective, gosh, man, I would love to see the needle move significantly. We're smart in how we provide the training. We're putting the right people on the bus to do the training. We're allocating resources, training money, and those things to the places that it needs to go. An example of that is that, SWAT does get a lot of training time and a lot of training budget, and rightfully so. They have a hard mission, and when they have to go live, they have to be well trained. But Patrol does too. Patrol is first on the scene on all these deals. And it's not always, you don't always have the luxury of just setting up a perimeter and holding until SWAT gets there. So we have to be smart in how we plan for training, what types of training that we do, who we bring in to train us, and we just have to be thoughtful about it. And that hasn't always been my experience in police work, quite honestly.
Oh, we can't. You're muted, David.
Sorry. From your position as the chief, how much of that were you able to influence your department in terms of like higher standards, as far like even qualification standards, training standards, hiring standards, right? Because that's kind of something I see a lot of, is especially in large departments, having recruitment issues, what keeps happening is the standards keep getting lower and lower.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, and just thinking about it a completely different way, especially with like the background I had in the Marine Corps. High performers want to be around other high performers, and even like the General Marine Corps has not really ever had a recruiting issue versus the other, other organizations. And take that even a step farther, right? The SWAT guys, do they ever have a recruiting issue? No, everyone wants to be on the SWAT team, and those guys are going to want to be there. So what does it take to influence that change of a standards across the board, aside from in the state of Texas pretty much attacking TCOL standards at that point?
Sure. Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I think Rick, you and I were messaging earlier today, and I think I may have mentioned this, where I said that, everybody thinks that just because you're the chief, you can make it happen. And that's just not how the world works. That's not how organizations work. So, I think what I said was that you have to have the right alignment. You have to have the right mission. What are we here to do? People have to be aligned with that. And you do have to use influence to get things moved and changed and done, because you got to, inside the organization, you got all these gatekeepers, right? You got, sergeants, lieutenants, captain, whatever. You got all these gatekeepers that are either, gonna go along with it, gonna see the vision, or they're gonna try to cut your legs out from under you because they're status quo people. They're, this harder standard just means it's going to be harder for me. Now, when it comes to the shooting stuff, let's be honest here. I mean, I've said this before, makes people laugh, but it's true. At the end of the day, your higher level admin folks are the ones that have to sign off and approve on what that standard is. And you can have all the solid reasons in the world why we need to increase the standards in the qual course, but you're still catching resistance. Well, what you're proposing is also a harder qualification for the people that don't shoot at the top. Okay, let's just be honest. I mean, that's a fact. They're going to have to go through that. Now, you hear stories all the time about, hey, my chief won't show up and do the qual with the troops. He has to come out with, other commanders, and they do their own little thing. And why do they do that? Why do they do that? So, I mean, I'll let you guys, answer that question for yourself. But that's but that's a real dynamic. Okay, you're asking the people at the top to make that change when it's going to personally impact them as well. Now, I could be wrong. I would love a chief to prove me wrong. I would love a chief to come on and counter debate me on that, because I know what I know from seeing what I've seen for 38 plus years. And there's some out there. Hey man, there are some that show up. I've got the man I work for now will show up and train with me, and will show up and qualify. But it's a little thing. It's not, we're not, this is not rocket science. This is something that you've got to do to keep your license squared away. But it's just not a skill that most administrators bring to the table. They didn't have that skill when they were a troop either.
Right.
They didn't have it. So
yeah, there's a belief that a lot of the people who go into admin are just anxious to get off the road so that they don't have to do, police work anymore. They just want to push papers. And I don't think that's true for everybody. I think that, and that's actually leads to two questions. But the first one is, what was your motivator for promoting into admin? Because you hear a lot of guys talk about, I don't want to go into admin. I want to do the training. I want to do that. But we also, at the same time, are upset that we can't get change pushed because people who want the change are unwilling to promote into a role where they could make change.
Yeah, exactly. So you just hit something that's going to come up in the podcast next week when it drops. We talk a little bit about about that. And what my motivation was just to have a seat at the table, right? You can't continue to look up and point fingers and say, you know, they're not making the right decisions, whatever, unless you're willing to be one of those people that will stand up, put your name in the hat, and try to move up the chain to make changes. So a lot of people do it for different reasons, to have an office job, to whatever. For me, the motivation was to have a seat at the table, to try to make change. I had some good chiefs that I worked for. And you also have bad examples of leadership that you can look at and go, and it's also a good trainer, to say, that's not who I want to be. That's not the chief, or the leader that I want to be. But if all you see are people just chasing a title for ego, then that's, you're going to continue to get those things. So I've always encouraged people to promote, but promote for the right reasons and for the good of the organization, the good of the profession, because we can't do it without having good, strong leaders in every position. And beyond that, I will say that, some of the strongest leaders that you will find in this profession don't have rank. Some of the people that I absolutely admire the most in this profession are people with nothing on their collar. And, that's just a fact.
Yeah, that's something that Bill and Jamie talked about in December, leading without rank.
Right.
Unfortunately, I chose sleep it over attending that live. I was in Germany, and I regret it because it's been one of the most popular lives that was done. But so the follow up to that question is, what did you do to maintain that connection to the road? Because you promoted to get a seat at the table. How do you maintain that street knowledge and the attitudes and perception of the guys who are still doing the job that you've promoted out of?
Yeah, that piece of it's not super easy. I mean, it depends on how you're wired. I mean, you can go out and do ride outs, and you can do that stuff. There was a point in time when I really sucked at that too. I mean, you're getting pulled in a lot of different urgent ways and not really always focused on the important things. But I don't know. I think just internally is just not ever forgetting where I came from, and just having that heart for the folks that are out there doing the job. I'm in many cases, I'm one of their strongest advocates in any organization that I've ever served in. I always have been, I always will be. And I'm also, probably the biggest pain in the ass there is when it comes to shitty leadership too. I'll be very vocal about it. I work both sides of the fence there. So
there you go. Bill, do you have anything to ask?
Oh man, we could go down a rabbit hole on that one.
Well, there's so many rabbit holes.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear the perspective from someone who, was at multiple different levels in an agency. And I was having a discussion with someone the other day, and a comment came up about how training and why it's important to, be better than the bare minimum. And the comment came up about, well, if the agency doesn't provide it and they don't mandate it, then it's not important to them. Why should it be important to me? And, that's an easy answer for me to go at because, we're passionate about that sort of stuff. But one of the things Rick and Jamie and David and I have talked about quite a bit is that's not the majority of people. So what was one way that you could see where those influential leaders that you see at the lower level that are amongst the, the group, what are things that they can do to help get that 80% of people that, show up every day, they do their job, but they're not enticed to perform better? What are some things that they can do, or some things that you saw maybe effective?
I think
those people.
I don't know, man. I think just being the example of what high performance looks like. I mean, a lot of times you have to paint a picture of those things, paint a picture of what's possible. This is entirely is true on the range. Most people don't even know what good shooting is unless they've seen something on video, but they've never seen it in person. And until you show them what good is, they're really not going to know. I'm, this was my example. And in '94, when I went to my first nationals in Reno, and I'd been shooting USPSA for, I don't know, a few months. I was lucky enough to get a slot. I didn't qualify to go to the nationals, but my section had an extra slot, and I wanted to go, so I went. Great experience. I was a pretty good shooter, in my little bubble at the PD. Was already a firearms instructor. Was already doing work on that end. Heck, had already been involved in a shooting. But until I showed up to that deal and got to see the absolute best pistol shooters on the planet, the Rob Lathams, Jerry Barnhart, those guys, they're old school guys, but they were the best on the planet, and it was there in person to for the first time to actually see what was possible with a pistol. And that completely changed my perspective on everything. I mean, I'd already made the observation pretty early on when I got to my first agency that people sucked at shooting, and it actually made me nervous. I mean, coming straight, I was straight out of the Army, Fort Bragg, 82nd Airborne. I mean, I was really kind of concerned by the level or the lack of skill that I saw folks having at that time. And so I don't know, there's a lot of things that sparked that part of the journey for me. The leadership aspect of it, man, you have to look for your rock stars. I mean, when you're somebody with rank, you have to look for the rock stars that you can help mentor and like help pave the way to clear the way so that they can become greater than they ever thought they could be. And I look for those opportunities. I try to find them. It's not always easy, but when I do and I latch on, I'm in it for the long haul.
Nice.
Yeah, it's funny how there's levels to, I'm a jujitsu guy and I'm better at that than I am at shooting currently, but there's levels to this game. And I remember when I was on the SWAT team, we had, we do our trainings all the time. And I finally had my buddy Chris Wimmer come down. He was a competitive shooter for Sons of Liberty for a while.
Mm-hmm.
He came down to do a shooting course for us for our red dots and stuff like that. And he shows up and we're doing drills, and these guys are the SWAT guys. They think they're hot shit. And guys are shooting bill drills in like 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds, and they think they're awesome because all the guys on patrol are, in 5, 6 seconds, they're really slow.
Yeah.
So we're doing this drill. He's like, all right, we're gonna get these times down. So he gets the times down to like 2.5. And he's like, all right, we're gonna turn it up a little bit. He's like, I'm gonna show you, we're gonna go to we're gonna try and hit a 1-2 bill drill. And a guy raises his hand on the line and he goes, that's not possible. And he goes, all right, well, let's see. And he rips a 1-2 bill drill. And everyone is just like, holy shit, I didn't know that this, they had never seen that before. And
Right.
so they thought that they were like the pinnacle of shooting. And this dude drives up from Georgia and burns it down. And it was really cool to see that in real time, how that little slice of humble pie was served. And then they were like, all right, we're going to listen to this dude.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but those are the kind of examples that you have to switch on the light bulb. And it's not even that, we want to train everybody to do a 1-2 bill drill, but you need to be better than 5, right?
Yeah.
I'd agree.
So we had oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going off that. That's a lot of that in the instructor courses that I teach for TTPOA. The first 2 days are essentially teaching these future instructors for their department is how to shoot the gun properly.
Right.
Retraining everything that they thought they knew because they lived in that bubble for so long. It's like, okay, this is what, here's practical shooting. Here's what it looks like. Here's what an actual, competency level of shooting looks like. And then here's how to get from point A to point B.
Sure.
And it drove me nuts when I went to my instructor qualification course. I shot 50 rounds the entire week, and then they read the manual from front to back.
Wow.
I shoot 1,500 rounds in the first 2 days of my instructor class that I teach.
Right.
Just getting those guys to understand, a lot better of what it is. And T-Cole is not the answer to everything.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. And I mean, I don't like really talking about qualification courses too much, just because they're all just ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not the test. That's not it. It mimics nothing that the type of shooting that you'll see
Right.
in an event. And that really, and when we talk about practical shooting, we're not talking about it in the sense of, oh, you have to go shoot a man. What we're talking about is shooting at a pace that's more realistic to the environment that you're going to likely be using the pistol. Because, when we see, body cam footage of a shootout, and we see what that shooting looks like, and then we see what the shooting looks like when we train, those two don't reconcile. Okay. And when we're not training folks to shoot at that pace, to train, to push, to see what they can do, and they're in an event shooting like that, they're not hitting anything but air. So we're doing a disservice by having this data and this information, and not applying it to a more practical approach to how we train people to shoot. But again, man, like, part of the battle and just getting there is that some of that work has to be done by them. It has to be done in isolation. It's kind of like, when you're going to a red dot, and people say, well, I have to go to the RDS class, and they're at the class and they have problems finding the dot. That's what everybody says. It's kind of slow. I don't always find my dot. Well, that's because, your structure behind the gun is jacked up, and it was jacked up before you put the dot on the gun. It was just easier to self-correct with iron sights. But you've got to get people to do the work to fix those things before you can actually see the results of that higher performance shooting. And so kind of going back to, bringing up Chancey, when you start introducing this stuff at the academy level, and, where you've got, recruits that are actively dry firing in a program week over week over week through that, and you've got a captive audience there. In the academy, that's a great place to start instilling that and building that into the program. Beyond that, you have a class, you talk about it, you talk about the importance, you talk about the whys, all those things. But at the end of the day, people still have to go home and do that work. And we all know a lot of people are just lazy. They're not going to do it. So
you got to get them to bite off on what you're selling.
Sure.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
And that's a case for a lot of different topics. That's the thing, is that firearms training is probably one of the best metaphors for all training in law enforcement. And, there's more people who are interested in firearms training than probably any of the other types of training that would be available to law enforcement. You have people who are willing to spend $650 for a 2-day course when it comes to firearms. They're not willing to spend $450 for a week-long course on being a better instructor or learning how to create training. Or we have one of our watchers. He was saying, as a non-LE, I've offered free wellness and fitness training education sessions to departments. Biggest challenge I've run into is so far to guys to give a damn about being better. And so the question comes up is like, how do you get people interested in training if they're already unwilling to train for firearms, which is something that could literally save their lives?
Sure.
Versus something like wellness and fitness. But also, how does a non-LE, we talked about a lot of change comes from outside. How does the outsider get into a law enforcement agency to actually instigate that change? So we're kind of like stuck in these two walls where we can't get people to do the training they need, and the people who have the training that they might want can't get through the agency barrier.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the outsider, making change inside, I don't necessarily think that they get inside the agency to make changes. I think they do it the same way that we talked about. I mean, they're impacting and influencing people that may be in a class to kind of, whereas, they may not, they may where they work, they may not have instructors of the same skill level or credibility, and they're able to impact new thinking and new things. That's really what I'm talking about as an external trainer. I don't really know of any examples of an outside trainer that's come in and really push change on the organization. I've seen where outside trainers have helped develop programs for the agency.
Right.
That's pretty common. I don't know, man. I don't have a great answer for that, because I think from a systems perspective, there's just so much dysfunction in law enforcement that where do you start, man? I mean,
Yeah.
really, where do you start? Yeah.
One of the things that you had mentioned earlier is getting the right people into the training, getting the right instructors in front of the people. One of the things we've talked about, and something I maybe every single one, if not most of them, I've talked about creating a training unit that is a selection unit, just like SWAT has selection, K9 has selection.
Yeah.
From your perspective, how difficult is it to create a training unit and creating those standards and getting that implemented so the right people are going to be in that training unit, and then creating an instructor development program that if you want to be an instructor, you're not just taking a certificate and blessed into the unit. You have to go through like an apprenticeship.
Yeah, I don't know. I think again, it has to fit with the alignment piece. It has to be part of the strategic direction of the department. To me, that's how you begin the process of instituting some of that change inside one organization. I mean, I wasn't tasked with changing the entire profession, but one little whatever little piece that I have in front of me. And so to me, I mean, you have to move those things slow, right? Because everything moves slow, and you
Yeah.
have to convince people that this is the right move for us, and it takes a lot of discussion, and you're going to get pushback because a lot of people don't like hard stuff, man. They
Yeah.
don't like being put to task. And but at the same time, we don't want, especially if the organization has full-time trainers, and it's not a part-time gig. Small departments may not even have full-time trainers, but you don't want people looking for a spot off the road to
Yeah.
just go sit and hide. You want very good, capable people that are skilled in teaching and training, that have a passion to continue to learn, to
Yeah.
continue to build skill. You see them work. Those are the types that you want in that role. So whatever process that a group comes up with to determine what that person is to me, it's just like probably implementing any other thing, any other process. But it's going to be a harder sell, because if the standards are higher and you're requiring more out of them, yeah, it's going to be a harder sell. But I think for units like SWAT and training units, firearms training units especially, there needs to be a pretty high esprit de corps with those groups, and a passion to train and to get better. And I mean, we're lucky if we have a department that has a lot of those people in it.
Yeah.
And if we don't, we need to start looking for people with those characteristics on the front end when we hire them. So
Yeah,
Just
absolutely.
my thoughts.
Brian, would you say that when it comes to that strategic planning that you were mentioning,
Yeah.
like if someone has, let's say someone's trying to change the firearms program, because that's an easy one to talk about. And are you saying that like that person should take into account, well, one, understand if there is one, like a 3-5 year plan of the department and see how that fits in and how that would move the department forward at the end of that 5 year mark and incorporate that into like their pitch or their
You sure? Yeah.
conversation? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would, I would be really, really surprised if you found a lot of agencies out there that had a legitimate strategic plan that you're actually working off of. I think there's a lot of places that has some bullshit work of papers together that they call a strategic plan that no one ever talks about. No one ever really, it's not there as a living document to help move the organization forward. What I'm talking about is something that's very legitimate, that sets out, you know, over the course of 3 to 5 years, you've got 4 or 5 high-level strategic goals for the agency to work on. One of those is going to be organizational development, and inside that goal, you're going to have, sub goals that are going to address, the types of training, firearms training, other stuff, just all that stuff that goes into that, and that's where you begin to lay out the action plans for changing, stuff like the qual course or improved training, or what training, what skills are lacking that we need to get help on. So I don't, I don't think that every place has got a strategic plan like that. But that would be my advice for departments to seriously look at using that tool, because it works. I've seen it work 2 different times in my career. Well, actually 3, because the city that I retired from is exceptionally good at strategic planning. One of the best I've ever seen. And so that was built into the culture, the city culture here, and at the department levels too. And then of course, the city that I came from in North Texas, same exact thing, same exact thing. So I've been pretty lucky, honestly, to work for 2 of, the fastest growing cities in the state of Texas, very, very upper tier places, good budgets, good support. So I've been blessed. I know not everybody has that, but I've been blessed to have that in my background.
When you were experiencing those like departments with the strategic plans, were they something that was always there, or was it something that like part way through your career, like they started to implement it?
Yeah, the first place it wasn't there when I got there. It was something we implemented, probably at about a little bit before I made like the rank of captain.
Okay.
So I was a part of that. I was a part of that process, and actually got to learn what that process looked like, work through the project, and then and then in the aftermath, got to see the fruits of that, and to see that it was something that didn't just linger on a shelf. It was something that was actually used. Now, it wasn't as good as what I've seen at the second city, and that was a little bit more polished and a little bit better. The PD that I became, they didn't really have a strategic plan there. That was one of the very first things that I did in my first year, is took a cross section of the department off site to have a strategic planning retreat, because I was interested. I mean, I was really interested in, what people thought of the mission statement, what they thought of the values, and just talking about the challenges and opportunities at that point in time, for the agency, and what are the things that we need to be working on. What are, kind of starting to set the vision for where we wanted to take the agency. And so when that all came together, we absolutely used that. I used it for budgeting. I used it to make the convincing argument to purchase this property for the acreage for the possible building of a training facility, and talked about the importance of that. So yeah, and then when I got to City Hall, yeah, we were rocking and rolling on that stuff. Have an outside consultant to come in to kind of help kind of guide the city council through that discussion stuff. And the end product is a work product that we used every year. And that guided the business, it guided the budget process. And it's like anything else, man. Like, how do you expect to get anywhere without a plan? Just talking about shit's not going to get you there. You actually have to you actually have to have a plan on how to get from point A to point B. So anyway.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
No, just one last one on that topic. That first agency, you said they started it, after you had been working there.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst for them to want to do that?
It was a new chief that we got.
Okay.
Yeah. So that particular chief is he is the chief that promoted me to captain. He's also the chief that said, "Hey, I know you're doing this competitive shooting stuff, but if I promote you to captain, I need both feet in the office," because I was traveling a lot. I was going to a lot of matches. And he says, and also I'm going to need you to go back to school and finish your degree. And I'm like, okay. So we did all those things to some extent. I kept shooting anyway. I didn't give a shit. I'm not going to stop shooting for anybody. But he had a head for that stuff, for the strategic planning stuff. And I'll be honest, at first I thought, oh God, here we go again. This is, some other bullshit deal that we're going to have to, but I actually did see the value in that. And having gone through that process with that agency, I was able to learn from that, and also bring that to this city, to the department. And of course, everybody has their own different view and spin on how to do a strategic plan. I think refining it and really being specific on what it is that you want to accomplish in the next 1 or 2 years under each of these, specific goal. And, one of them could be, crime control and reduction. It could be community engagement, could be another one. It could be organizational development. And under that specific goal was very meaty. It had all kinds of stuff in it, promotion process. It had incentive pay. It had all these things that we wanted to tackle and to look at and make proposals on. And so it guided us. And it wasn't just stuff that we're just pulling out of our ass pocket, throughout the year to try to get approved. So I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big, I would even approach, my own shooting in a similar fashion. I'm not going to go train without some plan of what I want to accomplish when I go train. When I was doing competitive shooting really heavy, like I would lay out a plan for the year, what matches I'm going to shoot, the things that I need to work on, like my goals for that year. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, is just a plan, a vision for you're here now, you want to go here. This is where you see us in 3 to 5 years. And how do we get there? These are the things that we need to accomplish for us to end up at the end zone. So that, in a nutshell, is what it is.
I love that you're talking about strategic planning, because in my book, Creating Training for Law Enforcement, I go through 450 pages of all the step-by-step process for creating training. I talk about legal liability, I talk about ADDIE, I talk about all the science and stuff. And the last chapter is, what do I do now? Because here's 480 pages or 450 pages of perfect world scenario where if you had complete buy-in, and you had a chief or admins come to you and bless you and say, create the most beautiful thing, that book would be that. But nobody starts with that. So the last chapter is actually about, how do I make change? And the first thing I talk about is create a strategic plan. I think that's one of the things that a lot of instructors are missing, is that they get their instructor cert and they just start churning out training. Well, what are you doing with that training? What is your goal
Yeah.
for it? Are you just producing stuff that you think needs to be produced? If each instructor sat down and learned how to do strategic planning just for the tiny world that they control,
Right.
I want to, this is my strategic plan for the next 5 years now that I have my instructor cert. I think that it would go a long way for making change because people would see someone very organized, very determined, and
Right.
working towards something.
I
So
agree.
I think that the keying in on that strategic plan is something that we haven't talked a lot about. Is that without a plan, you're just throwing crap at a wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
Um, Bill and I have been working on a course for the learning for the law enforcement training network, and they've adopted my process. All instructors that come onto their platform have to go through my process. And the first thing we did is what I call discovery, where it's just a list of questions, and I ask questions, we talk about it, we hone it, and I think Bill would agree that it really changed the perspective and the direction of his course. The thing is what we did is we did the first step of strategic planning. What is your goal? What is your interest? Who's your target audience? What can you directly impact? What resources do you have? That kind of a thing.
Right.
That was a bone to you, Bill.
No, what's cool about that process, Rick, is I went in with an initial idea on what we were going to do. And after that process was done, and I started my first little bit of analysis and like looking into what I can use to help me develop material, I ended up changing the whole premise of the class because I was like, yeah, this is too broad of a thing to teach. I need to narrow the focus down. So that process allowed me to hone in on, what am I actually going to do with this? So when you scale that up to like strategic planning, I'd imagine that those little things that I discovered are much bigger problems at a larger scale but are equally as important to realize that sooner rather than later when you're like halfway through or you're almost
Right.
complete and you're like, man, this isn't going to work.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that that's made you, Brian, so effective as a leader and for what you've accomplished is because you have that strategic planning background. And I think that what's missing in a lot of admin, but I think it's what's missing in a lot of careers. And especially when it comes to instruction. You just said yourself, you planned your entire year of shooting and what matches you were going to go to. That was a strategic plan. I'd be willing to bet that you probably had a goal for what you wanted to accomplish that year as far as shooting. You focused on like, I need to
Yep.
fix my grip for a whole year. You probably focused on something like that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's accurate. It's not those specific things, but that along those lines. And just to kind of back up to, I appreciate the compliment on effective leader stuff, but I haven't. I don't really think that I have been super effective. I think the passion has been there, and the desire, but there's been a lot of failures and a lot of missed opportunities along. But you learn from that, right? And you look back and you try to stay self-aware. But I appreciate the compliment. I think all leaders probably have those challenges, and but nevertheless, I appreciate it.
Well, and that just inadvertently showed another aspect of leadership is humility and admitting that I've made mistakes and I've learned from my
Yeah.
mistakes. So you're just digging the pit for your leadership skills, man. But
Yeah.
but that's also important as instructors and when you're creating training and all that stuff is that if you are unwilling to make mistakes, if you're unwilling to say I don't know everything, I'm worried about what I don't know, you
Yeah.
shouldn't be in learning in the learning environment. You definitely shouldn't be an instructor, and you absolutely have no business in a leadership position. You have no business. It's like there are managers and there are leaders. I think there's a lot more managers than there are leaders.
Yeah.
Managers fight for the status quo and they look for production. They're not looking for how to improve performance. They're not looking for how to increase capability. They're not looking to make other people promote over them. And that's one of the
Right.
things I did when I ran teams. I asked each of my people, where do you want to go and how can I get you there? And I would develop them into the next role, even if that meant that I developed them into a role that ultimately was over me. I didn't care about that. I cared about the quality of their performance and how far they could go. And I believe that you were probably much like that in your career.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah.
I know David is. David reached out to me and said, "Hey Rick, I love your stuff. I want you to start teaching classes." And he's constantly pushing me to schedule more classes. So I know that David's definitely one of those guys.
Hey,
And
hey, man,
what's that?
I said when you see certain things that need it, and you're doing what you did was such a niche thing that so many departments across the board are missing, because that's who influences the department ultimately is the guys who are teaching it. And if those
Yep.
guys suck,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So just cream like crap rises to the top. So anybody have any additional questions?
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
bring it, Bill. That's why I say that.
Oh yeah. No, I got two. But the first one is I couldn't miss an opportunity with this conversation to not dive into leadership just a little bit. And it unfortunately is towards the end. But one of the things that, I always had a hard time explaining to folks, and it's hard to articulate, and maybe you can do it better than me, but if you have a leader, like say you had a new supervisor, new sergeant, and they have aspirations to be a good leader, and I think most of them that are new do. What are some ways that they know that the things that they are doing are good for their people? Because I think a lot of times when guys get promoted, they kind of end up siloing themselves too far away from the troops, and they
Yeah.
either don't know that they're doing a good job, or they also don't know that they're doing a bad job, and by that means they don't know how to fix it. So
Yeah.
what would be your advice for something like that?
Well, I think what you described is human nature too, and in a lot of ways. But I think have trusted people that can give you feedback and ask for it, and don't be afraid to receive criticism. I think that's man. I think in any leadership role, you got to have thick skin, and you have to understand that no matter how good you are or how bad you are, really, or how bad you think you're doing, you're going to be criticized. You're going to make somebody unhappy. You're not going to be doing all the things that you need to be doing as a good leader to impress everybody. It's exhausting, number one. But I think being training yourself to be self-aware of things and asking for feedback is important. I don't know that a lot of people do that, but it's certainly helpful. Beyond that, I would just say, you know, model yourself after other leaders that impressed you, and stay away from the things that you've seen bad leaders do. I've said this my whole career. Sometimes you can learn more about what good leadership is by just not following what you see the bad leaders do. Just the opposite. It's like the Bill Costanza of leadership. To do the exact opposite, and because and I've done. I think I brought this up in Scott's podcast too. But I've done leadership discussions or classes, even like with fire guys too, and they're usually pretty vocal and pretty honest. Um, what's a good leader? Give me your thoughts on what a good leader is. And you'll see people kind of hesitating in their thinking, but if you ask that question another way, say, hey, tell me what are some examples of bad leadership, man, you start getting that stuff spit out like crazy. My theory on that is that I think a lot of people have a lot more experience working for bad leaders than they do good ones, and so it's just easier to recall those things. And those are the things that impact us more than anything. And so it's easy to recall those bad leadership traits that we don't want to associate ourselves with. But look, man, leadership, no matter where you're at, troop level, the troops can be leaders. They need to be leaders. But no matter what rank you have or what title you have, you have to stay in this mode of continuous learning, and not thinking that just because you went to this class or graduated from this college or this thing or that thing that you've arrived, that you can drop your rucksack and just coast from now on, because the journey never ends. And I'll tell you, the older you get and the more experience you get, you start to look back, and it becomes, for me, it's become, easier to pick and identify the opportunities where I could have done better and I should have done different, but I didn't. But those are, man, it's a journey, it's a learning experience. And for me, that's what's made the whole process, bearable and fun, is that it is a learning experience. And you're just always trying to figure new stuff out and figure yourself out.
Would you say that, I mean, I have my opinions on it, but would you say that when you're in that position, whether you're informal leadership or you got stuff on your collar, that when you're going to receive criticism, like you mentioned that earlier, but just because you receive criticism, in your opinion, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily doing a bad job. It could just be that you can't please everyone, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you're lucky, you'll hear the criticism, from people themselves or from somebody that you trust. But if you don't hear the criticism, just understand you're still being criticized. People are still talking shit behind your back. So you're going to be criticized. You can't be in a leadership position and not have some critical assessment of what you're doing or not doing. It's impossible, in my opinion. So to me, that's why it's important to have trusted people that you can rely on to say, hey, what are my weak spots? What am I doing that I should be better at? And hopefully people develop those kind of relationships with folks around them. So
that's a good nugget. That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things my biggest fear whenever I've led teams or is when I'm not hearing anything, I'm more nervous. It's like, I want to hear the negative stuff. It's like positive stuff, everyone, the end of course survey, people are just circling 10s and 5s to get out of the freaking class.
Yeah.
It's easy to be told, oh no, this is great. And then they leave and it's like, no, I know I wasn't good. David was with me when I put on my first class last December. And the whole time I knew that I was struggling because I was sleep deprived. I redesigned the entire thing 3 days before the class. Don't tell me everything was great when I know for a fact that I was screwing crap up. But I was also owning it throughout the class. I was also saying, this is going to be a little janky. This is the first version. I've been having to figure out how to inject T-Col stuff in here that's mandated. So I apologize in advance. Please give me honest feedback. But by doing that, when I saw people were stressed and I asked them, you look stressed, they told me. They flat out said, this is the problem that we're having. This is the stress I have. And it turned out it was just a misunderstanding about one of the instructions, but also told me that I did a crap job giving them instructions and I owned it. And I think that's an important part, is that if you don't create a safe place, whether it's a safe place to fail or a safe in training or a safe place to have to push back, you'll never get that feedback.
That's right. And as an instructor, that is extremely important. I mean, if you're building curriculum, and trying to be better at that craft, then you absolutely have to have that kind of feedback and to figure out where your weak spots are, your blind spots, and just come out of it better, right? I mean, always seeking that feedback. So
Yeah, absolutely. David, do you have anything? You've been quiet, man.
No, I got a ton of stuff, but we can save it for I'm taking notes over here, so future ones. Yeah, no, man, we went down a lot of different rabbit holes, and there's a lot of takeaways from this. So I'll save some of this stuff for a future one.
Well, it just so happens that we'll be doing this again on February 20th. Same time, same bat channel, same bat time. Actually, no, different bat channel. We're going to be doing the Instagram live
Instagram, yeah.
at 7 p.m. It'll give people an opportunity to watch this on YouTube, be able to formulate their questions. Hopefully they'll take as studious notes that David and Bill take. I don't take notes because I can't chew gum at the same time. So, but I remember a lot of stuff. So we'll be doing this again, 7 p.m. Texas time, Central Time, on Instagram Live, and hopefully people will come with questions and more things for you to address. But I think we covered a lot of really good stuff, and we peaked a lot of things that I don't think people really think about when it comes to creating training, when it comes to managing people or leadership. So I think we've had a really good call tonight.
Yeah, good discussion. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We are really grateful that you came on with us, Bryan, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Sounds good. We'll see you then.
Awesome.
I
Y'all be